Hi guys, welcome to Purple Ankles. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Natalie.
Here we bring back healthy conversations
and the beauty of divergent opinions. In today's podcast, we're going to be speaking about culture and the impact of culture on our mental health. As you know, both Stephanie and I come from an ethnic background. We're both Lebanese, so our culture has had a huge impact on our development, on how we are as people, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And today we're going to focus on the impact of boundaries within specific cultures. And I would love to hear your story, Steph, about your upbringing when it comes to boundaries.
So boundaries, I'll speak about a specific thing that impacted me in terms of culture. It's the space in the Lebanese community, and I think in other communities, but I don't know them, so I won't speak for them, but I speak for the Lebanese community. Everything, and there's a saying in Arabic, like your door is open to everyone. So everyone can come in anytime. You don't really say no. You can literally invite everyone. Everyone's at the other person's home all the time. There is a lack of personal space. Everything is enmeshed. Everything is all together. So there's difficulty in terms of boundaries, in terms of just having your own space or your ability or wanting to be alone or having some alone time. So that was something that was challenging in that community and that impacted me. How about you?
Yes, I think that's something that's very, very common in the Lebanese world. And I'm not going to speak only about Lebanese. I think I have a lot of friends that are from different ethnic backgrounds, and it's something that I've seen in other cultures as well. And I think it can a lot of people can relate to it. But as you said, we're going to speak about our own personal experience, and if it can relate to other people's, then amazing. So yes, same thing for me. I mean, in our culture, our door was always open. We had people over our house all the time. When it comes even to your bedroom, like we didn't have a lock on our bedrooms. Like now I look at, teenagers nowadays or young adults or even kids, and they have locks in their bedrooms. They lock their doors. Sometimes the parents can't come in because they need their personal space. And it still feels odd to me when I see that, because I'm like, I did not grow up with having a lock on my door.
My parents they don't knock. There's no such thing as like they just open.
It was just wasn't an option, right? Like you couldn't just be like, oh, I need some time alone. It was like, well, first I shared my bedroom with like my siblings, so that was one thing. And then the other thing, no lock on the door, so it's not like I could just hide in my room or anything like that. And if I did close my door too long, they didn't like that. Like, what's going on? What's wrong? What's happening in there? And they would just go in and make sure like they still had kind of access to us. I think the intentions were very good, and it's because also where they come from, right? But when you think about it now as an adult, for us it felt normal back then. It's just when you're exposed to other cultures, other people around you, and then you realize that it's not like that in every household. It's not like that everywhere, and it's not necessarily something that's always positive, and something maybe that felt wrong at the time, but you didn't know how to express it. But it was just like your normal, right? So you just kind of lived with it. But it is something that's very common. I definitely lived with that. But for me, I think the boundary that I think has been the one that kind of stuck with me, and that I worked on, I would say, in the last few years when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to culture, is more the kind of boundaries around my family unit. So the family unit itself, so I'm talking, like mom, dad, brothers, sisters, that small family unit, and even the larger one with, uncles and aunts and all that. There was like this sense of protection of the family unit. And I remember there was this saying, like in the family, that whatever happens in the family stays in the family. And I took that so seriously. And that was something that was extremely important. And it felt like I needed to kind of stick with the family and make sure that we kept our stuff to us, right? Like everything that was related to our family, whether it's good or bad. I'm not talking like just the negative things or something like that, but everything felt a little bit secretive. And I see that in a lot of countries, in a lot of cultures as well. This sense of privacy to the family, this sense of, I guess, shame that could be related to that. And the importance of keeping the family unit appearance well and protected and looking good and understandable. But at the same time, there's a lot of unhealthy, effect to that when it comes to how you are as a person. And you were sharing about kind of the boundaries you had when it comes to your physical space, right? And like the bedroom or your own person within this family. How did that impact you?
It impacted me a lot because I got to understand with time that I have an introvert balance to my extrovert side, and I wasn't able to tap into my introvert side because it was always invaded, seems a bit too much, but it was always distracted. I wasn't able to be in my own space. So I had my little journal, but even my journal sometimes was being looked at. So I didn't have that privacy, which was difficult to get that inner peace and to understand what I really was and who I am. And it impacted my relationship because every time that boundary was crossed, I felt some resentment and some anger that I would react instead of making them understand. So my reaction kept on coming from frustrations, from the boundary invasions, from that lack of inner peace that I was looking for, or that the culture just in general, not necessarily just my parents or so, didn't understand per se as a need, because it's not perceived as really normal. If you're needing a space, if you want to step away, if you just need some time to just clear your mind, it's like, what's wrong with you? Something's bad, or you're mentally ill, or are you okay? Is it me? Is it like, there's always that drama around something that is just, hey, I just need like one day alone just to clear my mind. I've been surrounded by so much, but it's not something that is perceived as accepted in the community. So it impacted me because it impacted some relationships because I didn't know that my resentment and my anger and my feelings came from that boundary that was crossed. I wasn't able to set my boundaries because it was perceived as negative. So I had to work on so many different facets and so many things to communicate my needs, because my needs were not necessarily understood or perceived as appropriate. How about you?
It did. I mean, it did impact me immensely. And that's not something I realized at the time. It felt, like I said before, it felt normal. And even if I don't think we can use it in that word, but like it did feel normal at the time that that's how things were. And I really I took it really, really seriously. And it felt like that if I spoke about things that were either said in the family or were, private to the family or more, or more, more private to the family, it's as if I was kind of betraying the family, right? And what I've realized with time, and it took me a long time before I realized that, and it's something that I'm still working on. It's not something that like just shifts in one day and like suddenly you're like changed. I think I would say around my mid 20s, so not like very early on, like mid 20s. That's when I started to realize that I was actually not expressing myself. It became something that stopped me from expressing how I truly felt about things, whether it was in relationships, whether it was in friendships with my immediate family, and everything I was doing. There was this kind of people pleasing pattern that I had, because you needed to kind of look a certain way, be a certain way, appear a certain way in front of everybody, and how you act and how you speak and how you behave. And I was not expressing my emotions. And it's a little bit different from you, because I'm someone who's more of an extrovert in general. So having the boundaries when it comes to the family and having people over and all that, that's something that was kind of more, that didn't impact me as much, I would say, on that side. But the family unit importance that was given by the culture is what impacted me the most. So limiting me in my voice, not speaking up, a sense of shame if I needed to speak about something that was not necessarily positive, and even if it's not related to the family, like even specific to me, like about myself, I felt like I shouldn't or I couldn't, and it wasn't okay. And like you deal with things alone and you don't express that to people around you. And it felt like you needed to bring everything back to the family and not to exteriorize like everything else around, like to other people. And then a shift happened, and I think it's just with time, and I think by being exposed to other cultures as well, by being more aware of how you're feeling inside, that I started to shift. And that's when I started actually to opening up more to my friends about how I felt about specific things. And after I started doing that, that's when I saw the real impact it could have and why it was actually not a positive thing to do that.
So how did you manage?
It started with awareness. It started with awareness and kind of acknowledging my feelings and acknowledging how the expression of my feelings actually made me feel better. And having support from other people when you're going through difficult things, the same way I supported my friend, the same way I was an amazing, a good ear to other people and being supportive to them, understanding that it could also be reversed. You could also be the person receiving the help. And that was the shift that happened. That's when I started kind of doing things differently and expressing myself differently. It's something I'm still working on. It's a work in progress. You still have that kind of, voice inside of your head that tells you, should I be speaking about that? Should I not be speaking about that? And especially when it comes to family, stuff, there is that shame that comes in that I have to fight within myself about speaking up about certain things. And I think for me, it's reminding myself that when that voice kind of shows up in my head, to remind myself that it's coming because of that conditioning that I had as a child, of like keeping things in and not sharing as much. So first, being aware. Second, listening to that voice and kind of putting it on the side. Still, expressing yourself and repeating that over and over again. And work in progress. I would say definitely work in progress. What about you?
Well, me initially, I didn't understand that that was the issue in terms of boundaries. And I can relate to a lot of what you say, because like what you've experienced too with your specific shame and all that also comes in play. So there's a lot to manage at the same time when you try to understand what's happening. In my case, I wasn't necessarily understanding that the boundaries was the issue until I did reach out for some help. So I reached out to BetterHelp. It's a platform for mental health psychologists. And I'm like, let me explore. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. Maybe I'm the issue and stuff like that. And the first thing that she told me was like, why do you always blame yourself? You're always like you're not like, maybe there's something else. It's a duality. There's something about the relationship and the culture and everything. So it opened my eyes to understand my needs and realize that those are needs. And mostly I had to work on how to communicate them. So instead of being angry, it's like, oh, that means that maybe I need some space and some time. And maybe I should just ask for that. And if they don't understand initially, it's okay. And just with time, I guess they'll understand. And that's what happened. So I was expressing because initially, because there's that sense of enmeshment in culture and that sense of being there for the other, and we're all, and don't take me wrong, there's something beautiful about it, but that sometimes you need a little bit of space. And it's when you ask for space, it's perceived as the other person is the issue, when it's not. It's just like you just have too much going on. So initially it was like trying to cope their emotion at the same time as trying to ask for my emotion. I'm like, no, it's not you, I just need some space. And so that was a challenge initially, but with time, my environment started seeing me being different and me being more full and being more energized. And I wasn't depleted all the time. I wasn't like moody. And I started, obviously I worked on a bunch of other stuff too, but that helped me communicate my needs, help them understand that it's not their fault. And they started understanding it. And now they respect it and they don't take it bad if I say, hey, I need something, I love you, I just need some space, like give me half a day or something. And they're like, okay, cool. And then they see me. It's like, if we don't make a problem out of something that used to be perceived, or that is still perceived in the culture as something being different or less appreciated, or not normal, if you want.
Mm-hmm. And I'm happy you're bringing this point up about sharing how you're feeling with your family and needing that space and setting your boundaries with your family, right? And I do want to point out that it's not always going to be positive from the other side, and you're showing a positive side to it. And I know sometimes actually our parents or our family can surprise us in the way that they respond. So I think sometimes we fear their response more than what the true response is going to be. And we underestimate how they can actually be understanding. But in some situations, they might not understand, and they might just not, because of how they were brought up or how they perceive things, and that's okay. And I think kind of finding peace with that is important as well. So setting your boundaries, finding the right words to say them too, I think is important. But also being okay with the fact that they might not understand. And whether it's people around you or your family or anybody, whenever you're setting boundaries, it might not be understood by other people. It might hurt some people's feelings, but that's not your responsibility. You have to be okay with how you're setting your boundaries and how you feel about that, so that you know that you're protecting your peace, always with respect, of course, and by choosing, the right words. And I think that's, sometimes we need help in finding the right words. Sometimes we don't know how to do that. And I'll be happy to share like a tool, someone that I really look up to when it comes to that. But being okay with not being understood, and being okay with not fitting into that family unit anymore. That's a hard one, I think, to adjust to, coming from this cultural background. It is something that's hard, because you feel like you're kind of, disassociating from the family. But there is a way to keep the family unit and enjoy the family unit, while still finding your individual person within that unit, and having that family, those people around you, understand that you might be different and you might need different things from them, and for yourself.
I mean, I find that that's in the culture, I find that's the most challenging, because everything is so embedded with everything that it makes you lose a sense of your own identity. Because let's be honest, like everyone is different and has that uniqueness, but everything is so enmeshed. So it becomes difficult, because you're not only dealing with detaching from that enmeshment, but you're also dealing with trying to figure out who you are, which you had no sense of because it was so blended with everything. So it's this whole, like, we're speaking about it as if it's nothing, but it took months to actually get to understand, to refine, to work the communication, to rebuild a trusting relationship, because now I have a beautiful relationship with my family. They understand me, I understand them. They need space. I help, like, I don't even take it personal anymore. If they're like, don't talk to me, I need space, I'll be like, okay, cool. You reach out whenever you need. So it's like we've reached that level of understanding. It took years and months and of work and trying to go back and forth. But because there's so much that goes into detaching, becoming yourself, and like in this whole relationship world of culture that you have to go through.
Yeah, and then you're talking about this, and the one thing that pops in my head, and a phrase that I think I've heard, my whole life, is, "This is who we are. This is how we do things. How we the we." We part of it like drives me crazy now. I'm like, I get it. I'm like, okay, but like, who's we? Like, why do I have to adhere to this we? And that's just like a regular common phrase that I know we've seen in our culture all the time. Like I hear it all the time. And now I see it in such a different way. And I'm like, and I even, like, I'm gonna question them. I'm like, who's we? Who's we? Who are we talking about? Who are we trying to prove ourselves to? Like, who's that group of people, or that entity that we're trying to somehow look good for? And then when you question them, they don't necessarily always have an answer, and then it triggers something. So that also can be a hard conversation to have. But now that I understand it in a different way, I'm able to also detach from that. I can understand why it's like that for them, and that's okay. I mean, the goal is not necessarily to come and change everybody around you and make them understand exactly how you are, and impose in a way like how you see things on them, so that they start doing it, because you might have the best intentions and want to make sure that they also kind of evolve and have a better understanding of like finding their own individuality within this whole family unit. But that's also that's their own battle, or that's their own journey. You don't even, doesn't have to be a battle, but that's their own journey. And the important part is that you're doing this for you, and kind of finding a way to balance that with the people around you. Now, there's one thing I do want to share, and I think that that's something that's important. I mean, we've been talking a little bit about the negative impact of having that family unit and having those, no boundaries and the open doors and all that. But I do think it's important to know and to pinpoint the positive impact of it. there is a beauty in having a family unit and having a community around you that I think we have lost track of in today's world. I think we're living in our little bubbles and our little, and everybody's in their own apartment. You don't even know what your neighbors are doing, what their names are, especially in the city. I mean, if we're talking city life. And I do feel like the community sense that we both shared in our culture when it comes to the family and to that open door and having people over all the time. And there's a beauty to that.
Yes.
There is a definite beauty to that. And I feel like I know that's something that's extremely important to my heart and to how I want my kids to have as an environment. But the sense of individuality within that is what needs to be protected.
And I think that's when you were talking, something came to me. It's like at some point we start with that enmeshment, and there's a point where you're like, I need to find myself and then come back with the real me, rather than what I was perceived to be or what I should be or what all of those shoulds. So it's that space, and that's why it's going back and reaching that balance after, where you know where you stand and everyone respects each other, where we could reach that, keep that community, because as you said, it's something beautiful that I think should be maintained and worked on.
100%.
We're going to close with the tools that helped us and share with the audience. So as I said, I brought up BetterHelp, which is an app. By the way, we're not getting sponsored, so we're just sharing this for your own benefit. And the BetterHelp still has a bunch of blogs. So if you want to look at different information regarding boundaries, culture, and stuff like that, you could find a bunch of information for free to help you understand or manage the challenges.
And the one book I would love to share with everyone is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. It's by Nidra Tawab. She has a beautiful Instagram page, by the way. I definitely recommend to go check her out. She focuses a lot on boundaries, not just on that. She's a clinical psychologist. She focuses on a lot of different subjects, but boundaries is one of them. And what I like about what she shares on her Instagram, she sometimes gives you like even like phrases you can use, or if you're looking for like ways to talk to people and you don't know how to go about it, or you're kind of in this journey and you want to find some tools to help you out. She's a great resource. So her book and her Instagram, we'll definitely share them on the YouTube page at the bottom, so you can look them up. On Instagram as well, and all the different social media links we're going to be sharing with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow. See you at the next podcast.